with Faraz Shaukatali.
Hello there, very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Live. Ceylon tea, a storm in a teacup or a real crisis, adding to the several crises that Sri Lanka seems to be going through. Let's find out, shall we? For once, we have a person who's been given a job that he's most eminently suitable for. Some time ago, somebody described it as a scientific way of appointing people to important jobs, that they knew what they were doing. In this case, we would all have to agree that this person must have been appointed in the most scientific way. Our guest today is a person who's spent a lifetime in tea, Ceylon tea, and he's right here with us, and he's now the chairman of the Ceylon Tea Board. Niraj de Mel, very good evening and welcome to the program.
Good evening for us.
So finally, we have somebody scientifically. Were you appointed scientifically, do you think?
Well,
you certainly know what you're doing.
Yes, I certainly do know what I'm doing.
Good, excellent. But what is all this business? People are up in arms. They're saying that, you know, this fluctuation of the exchange rate is causing havoc, and the tea industry is complaining. Is this a storm in a teacup, or is it a real problem?
Well, it's a problem, no doubt, but fact of the matter is, I mean, a similar thing happened last year when the rupee began to depreciate sharply depreciate against the US dollar, and the prices went up. So when the going is good, it wasn't a storm in a teacup,
right?
But now it's worked the other way,
right? So
therefore, we have a situation which actually affects, for that matter, not only tea exports, it will affect all exports,
right?
Because the buying power gets that much diminished. It was witnessed for the first times because it was since the last auction that the rupee began to strengthen, which is from about Wednesday or Thursday last week, and now at about 11 to 12% depreciation. We find that that has to have a negative impact on the tea prices, and it was evident from the day one of the tea auctions this week, where the prices in the morning was actually drastically low, but that was because I think people are waiting to see where it'll bottom out. But I think bottom out is too early to say, because I think the rupee is still strengthening. So the day one of the auctions this week saw almost 300 to 500 rupee drop for some categories of tea, particularly those who are selling at a very high price. So that's naturally the best of the lot that was available. They came down quite hard. But having said that, the teas at the middle category was also experienced a drop, but that wasn't to the same extent as the top end. But the bottom stayed firm. So all in all, the producer will receive at least about a minimum of about a 300 rupee backlash in prices per kilo for this auction. And well, the storm in a teacup, as we put it, would actually be where the grower is concerned, because his green leaf price is going to get that much more affected. He who was enjoying anything between 250 and about 300 rupees per kilo of green leaf since the rupee began to depreciate last March. And enjoying some enjoying as much as almost 400 rupees a kilo. Here the people who were enjoying only 80 to 90 rupees before March last year. Now they will experience a big hit.
So you expect that they get paid less?
Of course, of course. It's still too early because this is the first auction for the month of March. You have 3 more auctions to go, and they will be paid taking the monthly average on the 10th of next month.
Is this not linked to the dollar, to the exchange rate, or
it is? It is. I mean,
Okay.
practically, except for European tea exports, practically everything else is transacted in US dollars.
Right.
So, I mean, just to give you a very, very simple example on this, a $5 contract, dollar dropping by 40 rupees, you're talking of a 200 rupee hit per kilo.
Okay.
So that's what is reflected. So exporters being exporters, they will not strictly stick to the 200. They will even, bring it down some more, because they have so much more contracts that's already confirmed, which has to be shipped out from now till maybe even middle of April. So they will not want to, just strictly stick to the 200 rupees. They will see how much lower they can bring it down to, so that what they are losing, they can at least make some mitigation effort there.
But I understand the fluctuation isn't good for anybody who's exporting for a variety of reasons. But in terms of tea, the output of the actual production of tea, how much of that is, I don't know, maybe in dollars, maybe the sales, the numbers are up in pure money, but then everything else has gone up. Your freight costs have gone up, and fertilizer, when it was available, was gone up, and so on. But in terms of quantity, number of kilos, how's our industry doing?
Well, if you take to 2022, we saw almost 16% drop in the production. In kilo weight terms, it's about 48 million kilos. It's one big hit from a 219 and almost 300 the previous year. That's 2021. Last year, we only managed to produce 251.5 million kilos.
48 million, that's an awful lot of tea.
48 million. Of course, last year's FOB price is $5. But say, if we had that 48, we wouldn't have gone up to $5. At least even at $4.75 into 48 million kilos, that's the kind of money that country would have lost in terms of exchange for last year. If we had that full amount of, let's say, 300 million kilos, which is what we are now working around in the recent 5-7 years, we touched the record 340 in the year 2013, but since then it has been a gradual decline for a number of reasons. And if you just take only last year, 48 million kilos, let's say at a conservative figure of $4.75, that's the amount of money you would have lost in terms of foreign exchange earnings to the country.
So can you place this 48 million kilos of reduced production? Where can you place that blame on? Why 48 million less? Are we plucking less? There's no workforce? What is it?
Well, there are a number of reasons which I would actually go back to about 2015.
Right.
There were decisions made about fixing a price for the green leaf, which resulted in because there were a few good years before that. That's how we reached that record crop also.
Right.
Tea board started the B60 program. That means the best leaf 60. That means in a day's collection or each grower's collection, at least 60% of that leaf supply should be of the best standard, which is basically 2 leaves or 3 succulent leaves and a bud. Now all that effort, which saw that positive results, got thrown out of the window with this thing coming in, because when you fix a price like that, the other side of the coin is the good, the bad, the ugly, everything gets the same price. Right. So therefore, farmer thought, why should I spend effort in trying to pluck a good leaf? There are so many factories asking for my leaf, I can pluck anything and give.
Because the price is the same.
Price is the same, I'm getting the same price any which way. So that was one. Then there was the issue on the weedicide. Glyphosate was banned. Then came the fertilizer crisis as recently as 2020, or it was announced in 2021, and total effect began to be felt only last year, because there wasn't any fertilizer around. I mean, there was neither organic, nor there was, of course, there was chemical fertilizer that was imported, but they couldn't be released once the ban came on place.
Right.
So, and as a result of that, nothing went in. So, you're now talking of a bush that has been well nourished.
And that is quite old.
As well as it's old, yeah, exactly. Right. So, your first application, which has now begun to go in, I'm not saying it is very satisfactory, because I think farmers, as you quite rightly said a little while ago about the increase in cost of living and all that, is having a dampening effect on that. So even with higher prices that they enjoyed last year for their green leaf, quite a part of it is going towards their daily living. So as a result of that, not all of them are, happily embracing the fertilizer that is now available. So all in all, these are having an effect. So we have to first apply fertilizer and get the bush rejuvenated, and maybe the second application would probably bring us some sort of positive results. We are hopeful actually from about April onwards, which is our usual cropping period. Middle of April after New Year, going into May and June are the heavy cropping months, and then there's another mini rush that comes in from about October into November. Between these two periods, that Sri Lanka is most likely to catch up and overtake the dismal performance of last year. So that's where it is in terms of production. So that low production, therefore having that small availability or limited availability is probably one silver lining in the horizon to keep the prices somewhat propped up.
Right.
Had we had the usual crop coming in, maybe the downside is with this kind of a drop, we would have had even a severe decline in prices.
Right.
So I would actually put it down to a few more weeks and the dust should settle down, and we still don't have sufficient quantities to meet all the demand that comes to Ceylon tea.
I see. Ceylon tea, we're discussing one of this country's most famous and well-known brand, Ceylon tea. Perhaps even more enduring than Sri Lanka cricket, who knows. But if you want to send us your questions, SMS or WhatsApp 0772 300 305. It's right through to here. And we are in conversation with the chairman of the Ceylon Tea Board, Niraj de Mel. Mr. de Mel, why is it that our tea bushes are so old? What is the
We
reason?
have fallen big time on replanting.
Yeah, why
You see,
is
right up to the point of nationalization, the laid down norm by the Britishers who owned, through the Sterling companies who owned tea estates, they had a laid down norm of 2% of replanting every year. We fell back big time since nationalization. And even after privatization, I wouldn't say that it was satisfactorily followed by the regional plantation companies. Some are fantastic, they have done an excellent job, but not, I cannot say the same across the board.
What precludes these RPCs, the regional plantation
The return on
companies?
investment. But it takes a long time for them to...
How long does it from when you plant a bush?
Upcountry estates, which we call the high growns, would take a minimum of about 5 years
Okay.
for you to, uproot, treat the soil and get it back, and then start replanting and doing all that.
And is it also something to do with the fact that the RPCs have a limited lease?
That's another factor. That's
30 odd
53
years.
years. Yeah, at that time it was 53 years. So now you're talking about less than even 30 years to go. So that is not enough.
So 5
for
years
them.
is a long time.
That's right.
Are there any moves at all? Is the industry moving towards lobbying the government to give the RPCs a bigger, a longer, an extended period? So
I
that they
remember in one of the budgets 3-4 years back, a 99-year lease extension was mooted for the RPCs that have been doing excellently well, adopting the right agriculture practices and maintaining their gardens well. They were being tipped to do that, but nothing has been implemented yet. So they are still with the idea of what they originally took on, which was a 53-year lease.
But would it make sense for the government to negotiate with the RPCs that in exchange for a longer lease and a commitment of further capital
Personally, I
infusion?
think so. But I'm no economist or a financial person to do the numbers and see whether it still makes sense.
Right.
But definitely an extended period will definitely woo them into considering that positively.
And somebody's asking us what the effect of this fluctuation is going to be. Will it now, if the exchange rate settles, will it then bring more balance to the market?
Definitely. Considering the availability, current availability not very large, it certainly will. But that's something that we need to know from the financial sector, whether the dollar has now tapered off or stopped declining at, or rather strengthening at 320, or whether it's going to go down further.
Right.
Indications are that it may go down a little more and then stabilize. So, given those factors, I believe that tea producers will have to look at further drops in the coming week or two. But then demand is key.
Right.
But we are talking about demand at a time when global, particularly the Western countries, are just getting into a recession.
Right. I was going to say, what's all this uncertainty with our exchange rates doing to our market share?
Well, there is not much of a change in the front end price. It's in dollars. Your $5 will remain your $5.
Yeah.
But the ability that a buyer or an exporter has to pay up at the auctions, the freedom he had or the leeway he had when it was at 360 to what it is now and what it might be if it should continue the slide is getting shrunk. So as a result of that, tea prices are coming down.
Right.
But the front end, there won't be a change. In fact, the one strong message that's been coming has been that the front end price is too high because of our small production. Our tea prices have gone to a level that is where they would probably be able to get teas cheaper from other origins.
Yeah.
But be that as it may, every packer, every importer right around the world would like to have at least some amount of Ceylon tea in their packs, because that has been our hallmark.
We're getting into an interesting part of the conversation. We'll come back and ask you about that after this short break. We are in conversation with the chairman of the Ceylon Tea Board, Mr. Niraj de Mel. If you want to send us your questions, please do. SMS, WhatsApp 0772 300 305. Now time to take a look at this evening's headlines. We'll see you on the other side.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali. China provides assurance to support Sri Lanka's debt restructuring process. National Election Commission assessing the possibility of holding the postponed local government elections on the 25th of April. Police fire water cannons and tear gas at IUSF protesters. Strict measures will be taken if protests are held with the intention of destabilizing the country, President says in Parliament.
උද්ඝෝෂණ මාර්ගයෙන් මේවා කඩාකප්පල් කරන්නට යනවා නම් ඒ පිළිබඳ මේ ආණ්ඩුව තදින් ක්‍රියා කරනවා කියලා මං කියන්නට කැමතියි.
Professionals to launch a continuous trade union action from tomorrow to the 15th. Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And welcome back to Newsline Live. I'm in conversation with Mr. Niraj de Mel, who is the chairman of the Sri Lanka Tea Board, the custodian of the Ceylon tea brand. Mr. de Mel, what of blending? What is your position there? What is the position of this government there in terms of blending? Are we allowed to import other teas and blend in Sri Lanka?
Well, there is a certain category of teas that are allowed to be imported for blending purposes and re-export.
Right, but it's very small, right?
Very small because it's limited to teas that are not grown in Sri Lanka. For example, Darjeeling. That's a region in India. You can never have Darjeeling in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
And as you know, it's one of the very world famous brands as well, perhaps almost on par with Ceylon tea. So Darjeeling is allowed to be brought in because, as you know, Sri Lanka is way ahead in value addition. And there are in fact fair amount of companies, some of the leading names that you know of Sri Lankan owned indigenous brands that have made their mark in the global scene. So the trust that the importers have or the consumers have of that brand leads to telling them, you know, look, we'd like to also have under your same brand Darjeeling or an Assam or you know, one of those things that are not grown in Sri Lanka. So very limited. Actually, this goes back to 1981 when late Mr. Lalithathurat Mudli was the Minister of Trade.
Yeah.
When he saw the need for Sri Lanka's tea industry to expand into value addition, that's the time when he was told by the experts back then in the marketing field, told them that we can do that, we love to go there, but only thing is we are restricted unless we have the ability of getting some of these trees that are not available in Sri Lanka. So that's how green tea, at that time we were not growing green tea at all in Sri Lanka, or not producing green tea at all. By the way, green tea, black tea all come from the same tea bush.
Right.
It's a difference in manufacture.
Right.
Green tea, Darjeeling tea, and tea what they call made through the black tea process of cut, tear and curl was required for tea bags.
Right.
And that was because we are right now we are 91% orthodox manufacture.
Right.
That is all to do with rolling, in short.
Right.
That actually gives that flavor that we are world famous for. But there is a macerated format called the cut, tear and curl, which it's like minced beef, it's really macerated.
Right.
But that actually brews fast in the waters. When you pour the hot water, it brews fast. So in a fast-paced world, they like to put the tea bag in and see the color changing in the water immediately.
Right.
So that type of teas were not available in Sri Lanka at that time. Also at that time when the late Mr. Atulapandi brought that gazette notification to allow permit imports of those teas, we were losing the Pakistan market to Kenya. And that was because of this CTC, where there was this thinking that CTC tea, you have double cuppage compared to a single cuppage of Ceylon tea. And it was cheaper. So therefore, that thing also was another driving force that resulted in bringing that thing. So to right up to date, that's all that is allowed to be imported in Sri Lanka.
Right.
And there's so much of stringent measures that were brought in the last decade or so. We have even shrunk from what we did maybe in the middle 2000s. That's in terms of imports. Having said that, Sri Lankan brand, Sri Lankan owned companies having the Sri Lankan brand with the lion logo that's for which Sri Lanka Tea Board is the custodian, that's making a lot of ground in markets like Russia. For the Russian consumer, moment they see the lion on a pack, they think that this tea definitely has come from Sri Lanka. It is, and it's packed in Sri Lanka. So that thinking of a blending is not there either.
Right.
Meaning, when I say blending, well, all our teas are also blended, but that's only Sri Lankan teas that are blended. But blending with other origins is not there when they see that lion logo and Sri Lankan brand. So that has enabled us to have a good foothold in the Russian market. Of course, way less than what we did in the middle 90s when we really took off with the Russian Federation.
Right.
We are not shipping anywhere close to what we did in that time.
Right.
Because other origins have also got in there, and the Russian packers have expanded.
Would you, well, two questions. One, what's the copyright position or infringement of the lion?
Well, in certain countries we find that infringement is quite rampant. We are fighting to the best of our ability, but as you know, legal costs are very high. But those are not countries that are developed. We don't find any kind of infringement in developed countries. But in certain countries which are large importing countries, but still who don't have the structures in place to the extent like a developed country, would of course resort to, there are packers who will resort to infringing on our brand. So whenever we are informed, we do send letters of demand and so on to the culprits concerned. And I know there was a case about 10 years ago in Dubai, a leading brand infringed on the Sri Lankan brand, and he was taken to task, or his organization was taken to task, and we were very successful in that. That is one of the well-organized Middle Eastern countries.
So this is obviously part of the active work of the Sri Lanka Tea Board.
Of course, yes.
And would you welcome change in legislation, an outlook that allows the import of other teas into the country?
For us, to be very honest, with a vast smallholder and grower means larger than a smallholder population in this country, you have to first get them on board if you're thinking of a area like that. I believe we should first get ourselves organized and increase our production to a level where we have something sizable to go in. Because otherwise, well, there are many schools of thoughts on this. I mean, I know the exporter fraternity would love to see that happening so that they could expand their market shares in many countries. Having said that, there can be detriments to our own production.
But if they were allowed to do that, would they be able to compete with the big names in tea?
Potential is there, yes. In fact, that was the reason why they were very keen about, in the years up to about 2010, 2012, they were very keen to go on that line. But we eventually, Sri Lanka took the decision not to permit beyond what is currently permitted.
How are the smallholders, this question coming in, how are the smallholders coping with the high price of fertilizer?
Well, mixed results coming in. There are, I would say, a good 45 to 50% of the smallholders, with the assistance from the respective tea factories to which they supply the leaf for manufacture. They get assistance from those factories, and therefore they are encouraged to loans to be recovered over a period of time, a stipulated period of time. They get that. In fact, Tea Board started last year in July of last year to give factory owners, through them, to get the fertilizer across to the smallholders, 3 month to be paid back in 3 months at a very low interest rate of something like 8%, and that also didn't have the full extent to which we would have liked it spread, but at least there was about a 50% take from them. Right now I hear the fertilizer prices have come down, and as a result of that, even the existing fertilizer companies are also giving credit. But even with all that, because of, I suppose, the cost of living prices, cost of living going up and so on, not all of the smallholders are fully open to that. We have started a lot of promotion campaigns through social media, through newspapers, to get the message across for the importance of them applying fertilizer.
Any plans to introduce technology to these to the tea lands, like by having various small holdings geotagged, and so that you can control the amount of fertilizer that's being used there, or being given to them in case they're using too little or too much?
That initiative started, actually. Tea Board has this tea land registry which they're building on, and getting all the smallholders registered and things like that. Then there are initiatives like to helping them in their irrigation, mechanized plucking, hedgerow, getting the bushes planted in a format of a hedgerow, so that you could use the broader machines to pluck the leaf, so that in a given environment of reducing numbers of tea workers, we are having a huge issue there, particularly in the upcountry estates. But it's even affecting the low country, which is southern sector, and the Sabarakamu sector is also been affected. There are some people who have started on this thing, and they are getting a very good yield, in fact, through this mechanized plucking. But having said that, there's still that thinking that it's nothing like hand plucking and all that, that will not damage the leaf. They will do selective plucking and so on and so forth. So all that can, but in this day and age, with the technology so advanced, I'm sure we can even fine tune that. Maybe we'll find it difficult on a high, the steep terrain to do the mechanized plucking, but certainly on the flatlands, particularly the areas where we are now big, 62% of our production comes from low growns. That can be one of the things that we should be pursuing. We have started in small ways, but it should be expanded.
This might be the last one. Please ask, how much of land has been abandoned which should have been replanted by RPCs?
I can't give numbers as such, but I know it's quite a bit. Significant lands. Some say significant. We are at the moment working it out, because the ministry also wants the numbers. From the time they took over, or time they were given the estates, to what it is now, there is a fair amount of abandoned land or uncultivated land. Having said that, I think some RPCs are making use of those lands for other crops. Well, it's depending on how they have come into these agreements with the state at that time when they went in for privatization. In the smallhold area, there are gaps, but we are now trying to get those. We are trying to introduce direct planting without waiting for rejuvenating and all that to get down, and increase the number of bushes per acre.
And what's the outlook? What's your forecast?
I'm very hopeful for the Sri Lankan industry, even in spite of aging bushes and things like that, provided the right.
Is it a good investment to invest in tea? Either through the stock market or for somebody?
I wouldn't want to comment on the RPCs whether it's a good investment to make, but if you have the ability to invest on, let's say, one property and a factory to run, I think it's a good investment to go, because nothing like agriculture. I think that has been the backbone of this part of the world, and we need to really go into that type.
Niraj de Mel, it's been wonderful listening to you. Thank you very much for being on the program.
My pleasure.
And that's the way it was, our interview today with Niraj de Mel, the chairman of the Sri Lanka Tea Board, the custodian of the brand Ceylon Tea. Thank you. And it's now time for the Primetime News. Take care, have a great evening as much as you can, and as always, God bless you all.